I observed my spouse and my next-door neighbor locked in an embrace at a garden gathering, and without uttering a word to either of them, I retreated to my car, took a seat, and placed a single phone call. This action reshaped the lives of 4 individuals. Perhaps 5, if considering the 6-year-old boy who still struggles to comprehend why his father no longer resides there. I am Drew, aged 42. I own an auto shop on Mercer Street, a simple 2-bay garage that I've managed for 11 years. Our house on Ridgemont Drive was purchased by Carly and me approximately 8 years ago. A peaceful street with considerate neighbors, the kind of place where people wave from their driveways and offer food when someone falls ill. Shane, a large man who operated a construction firm, lived 2 houses away, always engaged in some project. He was the type of neighbor who'd lend tools without asking questions and show up for football Sundays with a six-pack and an opinion about every play. His partner, Nina, was one of Carly's most intimate friends. Marcus, their eldest child, mowed our lawn during one summer for additional income. Caleb, the youngest, was 6. We had been acquainted with this family for years. I believed I understood the implications. I was mistaken. Carly and I were not flawless, but I assumed we were strong. We crossed paths at age 28. She ran a boutique downtown while I continued to work for another's shop, accumulating savings. We got married, purchased a house, settled in. No children. The conversation about kids occurred occasionally and eventually ceased. Both of us became occupied. She climbed the corporate ladder to become district manager for a small clothing chain while I opened my own shop. Life filled the empty spaces. All I desired was to return home to someone happy to see me, share a meal not consumed in front of separate screens. My wishes were not elaborate. However, during the past couple of years, I felt as though I was the only one still making efforts. It seemed like I would extend my hand, and she had grown accustomed to the distance. I reassured myself it was just a tough phase. Every marriage encounters such periods. What first struck me as innocuous was Carly frequently referring to Nina. Visiting, having coffee, returning items she lent, such neighborly activities. I didn't give it much thought until one day, Nina waved at me from her driveway and commented about not seeing Carly in almost a week. I dismissed it, attributing it to Carly possibly getting her days wrong. Nina smiled and went back inside. I stood in my driveway for a while, pondering nothing in particular. Then I went indoors and started preparing dinner, only to realize later that I had been idly gazing at the same pot of water for a long time without even turning on the burner. I observed subtle changes. I found myself making excuses to avoid disturbing her. Carly began going out more on weekdays, citing book club meetings, work commitments, and catch-ups with a friend I had never previously heard mentioned by Carly. I didn't challenge her, observing that my incessant questioning might resemble intrusion into my wife's personal space. Like some men I've seen in other marriages, I chose to remain silent during work hours. One Tuesday, she returned home at 10, and I was in the kitchen with a cooled-off coffee. She walked in with slightly altered hair, not disheveled but repositioned. She mentioned the restaurant was noisy, leaving briefly for fresh air. I acknowledged her. After pouring water and heading upstairs, she left me standing there for a moment longer. Then, strangely, I went to the sink and cleaned the coffee mug excessively, rinsing it under hot water even though it was already clean. Eventually, I retired to bed. A few days later, I accidentally met Shane by the mailbox. We chatted casually about shop matters and an upcoming game, nothing significant. He appeared as calm as ever, maintaining eye contact throughout our conversation. In the morning, I navigated to the store where I spent 20 minutes searching for a wrench I had unknowingly grasped throughout my journey. The revelation of its location was not dramatic. It was a Saturday, and I was in my garage, replacing a truck belt on my own accord with no pressing time constraints. My wife, Carly, had mentioned she was visiting Nina to return a casserole dish and pick up some magazines she'd lent. She returned within 40 minutes, which seemed normal. That evening, I texted Nina about an upcoming neighborhood block party circulated on the street group chat, simply asking if she and her partner were planning to attend. She responded promptly, indicating uncertainty and mentioning that she hadn't seen Carly in a while, suggesting we should all catch up soon. I reread this message twice, then thrice. The irony struck me. Carly had been at Nina's that very morning for 40 minutes, returning a dish and collecting some magazines, while Nina was texting me 6 hours later stating she hadn't seen Carly in a while. I placed the phone aside and headed to the refrigerator. Stayed there with the door ajar for approximately 30 seconds, then recalled I wasn't truly hungry. Closed it, pondered over 2 plausible scenarios. Either Carly hadn't visited Nina at all or she'd gone somewhere else on the same street disguising it as a visit to Nina. Shane's residence was just 2 doors away, situated between ours and Nina's. I didn't discuss anything with Carly that evening. We watched television instead. She dozed off on the couch. I turned off the screen. Picked up my phone twice to message her but didn't send anything. 2 weeks later, the Hendersons hosted a casual backyard party marking the end of summer. No formalities, just the neighborhood gathering, burgers, folding chairs, and kids playing around. Carly expressed interest in attending. I planned to leave the store and arrive an hour late. In fact, I arrived nearly 90 minutes after her, parked on the street and entered the backyard through the side gate. Before entering, I could already hear the crowd's commotion. Music, boisterous laughter close to the grill, kids quarreling about some matter. Pushing open the gate, I found myself amidst a full yard, approximately 30 people scattered across the lawn and patio. Without conscious thought, I searched for Carly. She was at the farthest end of the yard, near the back fence, distanced from the main crowd. Shane stood beside her. They weren't engaging in loud conversation or attracting attention. Instead, they were close, with Shane's back partially turned to the party and Carly looking up at him. His hands rested not on her side or arm, but on her waist. The way she gazed at him was not your typical neighborly glance. I stood there for about 5 seconds when from behind me came a call-out and laughter, the grill still sizzling. The rest of the scene seemed ordinary. Turning around, I exited, closed the gate, and walked to my car, settling in the driver's seat. Initially, I assumed, albeit foolishly, that I had inadvertently left my work gloves on the car's passenger seat that morning and they were missing now. I examined beneath the seat twice before recognizing my mistake. Subsequently, I picked up my phone to call Nina, a neighbor with whom I had exchanged only a handful of messages over the years about local matters, organizing barbecues, and once when her vehicle wouldn't start and Shane wasn't home. Upon dialing her number, she answered on the third ring. The sound of Caleb, a 6-year-old, could be heard in the background, making typical noises of excitement after an indoor evening. She seemed tired but fine. I maintained a calm tone. I said, "Nina, it's Drew. Hey, Shane's still over at the Hendersons. You might want to drop by, pick him up, perhaps greet a few people." I hesitated before adding, "It's a lovely night for it." That was all I suggested. No accusation, no warning. Simply a motive for her to walk to 3 nearby houses. She responded, "Oh, that could be nice." She requested Marcus to converse with Caleb for a brief period. Following that, she mentioned she'd arrive shortly before ending the call. In the car, I kept an eye on the Henderson residence, where the music continued playing and laughter echoed inside the garden. Suddenly, something surfaced in my thoughts that hadn't crossed my mind during the call. Caleb, riding his bike last spring, constantly asking Shane to watch him as he completed laps in their driveway, each time shouting, "Watch, Dad, watch." I hadn't considered that boy for a single moment before dialing. 8 minutes later, Nina appeared around the corner, dressed casually and at her usual pace. She strolled up the driveway towards the backyard gate, opened it, and after half a minute her voice pierced through the music. Instead of shouting, she called out his name crisply and flatly. Despite the music continuing to play, everything else fell silent in the yard. I chose not to return to the gate or peer into what was happening within that yard, but drove home instead. Stepped into the car, switched to drive mode, traveled 3 blocks, parked in my personal driveway. The house appeared dim. A reflexive action had left the porch light on. I entered the house, filled a glass with water, and stood at the entrance door for a moment with it ajar. From the porch, I could see along the street. After approximately 20 minutes, Shane was spotted walking swiftly towards his residence alone. A few minutes later, Nina headed in the same direction. They weren't together. Carly didn't return home for another hour. Upon her arrival, I was seated at the kitchen table with the light on. She paused in the doorway upon noticing me. An expression flickered across her face. It wasn't quite guilt. It seemed she was trying to gauge the room before deciding what to express. She remarked, "You didn't stay long." I replied, "No." She waited. I remained silent. She stated she was weary, bid good night, and ascended the stairs. Her voice retained its usual tone. This normalcy was somehow the most disconcerting aspect of the entire evening. Spent some time at the table. Eventually noticed I was still in my work attire, my jacket included. Found myself seated in my jacket within my own kitchen past midnight, contemplating Nina passing through the gate, recalling Caleb circling on his bike, pondering how swiftly I made that call without giving it much thought. The subsequent 3 days were peculiar for me. Melanie and I navigated around each other without any direct contact. She didn't mention the party. Neither did I. We ate at different hours, exchanged necessary words, maintained distance from one another. Once we simultaneously reached for the coffee pot and both withdrew as if scorched. Neither spoke about it afterward. Visited the store every morning and extended my working hours on both days. There's a certain satisfaction in dealing with a clear-cut issue. With parts not functioning smoothly, soft brakes locating the issue and rectifying it. Found solace in that. 4 days post the party, I spotted a rental truck outside Shane's residence, with him lugging boxes out himself without giving me a glance as I exited my driveway. Nina's vehicle remained parked. She didn't depart. On the third day, Carly emerged from her house with a packed bag. Standing in the kitchen doorway, she announced her intention to stay with her sister temporarily, stating they both needed room to work things out. I responded, "Is that your term for it?" My words sounded more flat than intended. She hesitated, then said, "Drew." I replied, "Go ahead," and she stayed a while longer before departing with her bag. I heard the front door close, followed by the car leaving the driveway. I peered out the window to see Shane loading another box into the truck alone, not focusing on anything specific. I watched him for a minute, then brewed coffee I didn't consume. A week following Carly's departure, she called me. In the rear bay, my hands soiled from a transmission job, I declined her call as it echoed 5 times. Another call came after 20 minutes. I left my phone face down on the workbench, focusing on my task. I wasn't sure why I didn't answer. Some grease on my hands and being in the midst of something made stopping feel incongruous. I promised myself I'd return her call once done. After completing the job, I drove home, neglecting to make that call. That night, I cruised past Ridgemont's house, still holding a key, slowed down and peered at it from my car. The lawn seemed overdue for mowing, porch light off, giving an empty appearance, although accurate. I sat in my parked car for some minutes before a passing car glanced at me curiously, perhaps questioning my reason for idling outside a vacant house. Eventually, I drove away. I contacted a real estate lawyer using a number provided by one of my workshop acquaintances. After a brief conversation, he outlined the initial procedure for me, which I jotted down onto the back of a parts invoice I carried in my pocket. Upon returning to the workshop, I stuck the receipt inside my locker and examined it later. Realizing I hadn't eaten since that morning, I headed out to grab something. 3 days later, I encountered Nina at the Clearwater gas station. I almost veered to another part of the lot, but upon seeing her car at the pump as I arrived, I switched off my blinker and parked instead. Nina noticed me immediately, neither smiling nor looking away. We spoke near our respective cars. She appeared fatigued, a weariness unrelated to rest. In the back seat, Caleb was occupied with headphones and a tablet, swinging his legs idly. We remained silent for a while, then she admitted, "I figured out you made that call." I replied, "I'm sorry, Nina, I should have given it more thought before I dialed." She fell quiet. Later, she stated, "I needed to know." She cast a glance at Caleb through the window. He's been asking about Dad's return every morning. I had no comforting words for that. I told her I was sorry once more. She nodded, swiped her card at the pump, and left without another word. I watched as she drove off on Clearwater. At the pump, I stayed for a moment after she was gone. Carly never reached out to Nina, not even a text or voicemail, not once. I had ensured it multiple times. Whatever Carly felt about everything, Nina was excluded from it. I filled the tank, climbed into the truck, and sat there for a bit longer than necessary before I started it. I vacated the Ridgemont house around 3 weeks later. Above the store lies a compact apartment comprising 1 bedroom, a bathroom, and a kitchen barely larger than a hallway. For years, I utilized it as storage space. I cleared it out, installed a bed, shifted some boxes up the stairs. On the first night, my sleep was disturbed by the traffic on Mercer Street. The second night, I woke at 2 a.m., drove to a diner on Route 9, consumed eggs and coffee, read a newspaper left abandoned on the counter, and faced no disturbances. I returned home by 4 a.m., slept soundly afterwards. Carly and I managed all matters through our attorney. She contacted me once more when the paperwork was initiated. I responded, she expressed, "I didn't think it would progress this far." I inquired, "Which aspect?" She failed to respond. We remained on the line for a while, and then she apologized. I acknowledged. The house was sold in 3 weeks. We divided the necessary shares, marking an end to 8 years on Ridgemont Drive. Shane's residence stood vacant for approximately a month before the "For Sale" sign was erected. One day, I learned he was residing at a place on the opposite side of town. An evening found me behind the store, seeking some fresh air after an exhausting day. A barbed wire fence enclosed an empty lot with no notable features. Suddenly, my phone vibrated with an unknown call. I chose to let it go to voicemail, but no message was received. Upon returning indoors, securing the store, and ascending the stairs, the apartment reeked of motor oil and aged wood. I kept the window ajar, stretched out on the bed in my boots. Later, I rose, removed my boots, and retired for the night.